All right, so it feels like we're on the verge of maybe some announcements of some sort from sports, and that the NHL may be part of this. Keep in mind, when everything shut down, it all shut down at the same time. This was a coordinated, okay, we're going to take a timeout, we're going to figure where we're at, and then we're going to try to figure out what we're doing this summer. And I've certainly seen a ton of people saying, oh, no, 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 just cancel everything, shut everything down. I'm not sure why they're still reading sports articles. This is the only thing I can't figure out is why people who just want to say shut everything down are still watching videos on this channel, for instance, and especially if it's a news video. Like his history videos, sure, but for people knowing it's a news video, as this one is, I'm kind of bewildered. But there's a number of things going on. So the White House has this meeting today on the phone with NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, WNBA, PGA, LPGA, NCAA, NASCAR, USTA, and others. There's also become an increasing number of players, and I think this is across every league. I can't see it being just like NHL and NBA. I would imagine it's everybody saying, if we have to be locked away from our families, no thanks. And I get it. I do. I totally do. If you told me tomorrow, if you said, hey, Shannon, you can report on the playoffs, but you're going to have to leave your wife and kids behind for 4 months, I'd have some serious reservations as well. When people ask me, like, oh, well, you're on the West Coast, would you accept a job working for insert name of organization here? My answer is always, I'd probably have to move from where I am, so probably not. I would basically have to tell my wife, well, hey, you can't leave, so I'm going to go, and we'll see each other later. I couldn't do it. So I get that. I think leagues are going to have to get they're going to have to get a scenario here where players are isolated, but not necessarily locked down, isolated. Like, so they're going to have to do something, and it's going to be the NHL and the NHLPA that are going to negotiate it. But I think this is going to be across every league, where, yeah, the 4 month, 6 month, 8 month period, that's a little much. So the number of tests are projected to go up a lot in the coming months. This is what was said on the conference call. The number of tests available in the U.S. are going to go through the roof. In Canada, if I want a test, I can get one where I am. I don't know about every area of Canada, but if I want one, and if I discuss it and they go, yeah, no, you need one, then I can go and get one locally. So that's where that's at here. And again, that's why different areas are being looked at by the National Hockey League. The NHL might be in a little bit of a better position than some of the other leagues in that they're able to have more Canadian locations that could potentially work, that already have a professional organization there. So for Major League Baseball and the NBA, yeah, you have Toronto for both, but for the NHL, there are multiple locations. And again, this is all still nebulous. We still don't have a timeline, and it's hard for players as well. They're human beings. And I know the whole thing of, there's millions and millions and millions. One anonymous quote that was on the, I want to say it was on the Sportsnet article talking about this, because this is on every site right now, where we're trying to see how the restart's going to open, where a player's saying, look, we could lose $1 billion as a union over this. That's a lot of money. If we don't go back to work, if we sit out, we could lose a lot of money, and this could go on for a long time. And that's where everything is going to get weighed out. Is the idea that, yes, public safety is a very, very important thing right now. And I've been staying home now. It's 7 weeks I've been home. And yet I understand people saying, I need to go back to work. And I get that. And that's where we're all kind of stuck. And pro athletes aren't really any different in this, that they're not working right now and they want to go back to work. Some. And again, some, I say, because it's not that the others don't necessarily want to. It's, I don't want to leave my family for months, which is understandable. And then there seems to be a split as to whether or not your team's in the playoffs, as to whether or not you want to come back. Where some of them are saying, well, yeah, I don't want to come back. But if there's playoffs, maybe. So if I know I have a shot at a Stanley Cup, maybe. And yet there's talk of, well, how legitimate would that cup be? I would argue with every team healthy, and a lot of teams getting a crack at it, you are a legitimate Stanley Cup champion if you win this. The one thing that I've seen a lot of people saying, well, we have to just wait until October. Just leave it, and in September we can come back and start all over again. Things may be exactly the same in September. Things may be exactly the same in October. Things absolutely could be exactly the same as they are right now. So the idea is if the NHL can figure out a way to make playing work and make it so that maybe players have a certain list of people that they're allowed to have contact with, and that includes their families. So yes, they can have their wife and kids with them, and they're isolated as well. And so you have this situation where they're not feeling quite so locked off. Because if you're the National Hockey League, if you're sports in general right now, and you get these players that are feeling homesick and they're not mentally 100% checked in on the games because maybe they've got a kid at home that gets a cold, maybe they've got a kid at home that breaks his ankle, maybe their wife ends up getting ill, something like that, and it can distract them from the game. Like, you want to make sure there's as few distractions for players as possible. So you might be better off to figure out a situation where it's not just players and staff and everybody who's on their own, that you allow for families to be in there. And again, you're controlling, you have your tests, and then it's about contact tracing, which is, if you hear it on TV a lot, that's a big thing right now. So it's a lot of moving parts. It's something that each individual league's going to have to figure out. The PGA is going to return on June 8th. That's their tentative date set. And golf, you can do this. Golf, you can absolutely have social distancing. I could go to a local golf course if it was open right now and not get within 6 feet of another person that wasn't, I'd obviously go with my wife, so not just by myself. But I could do that. Where I could be in a situation where I'm staying, I'd have to use hand sanitizer with the flag and that kind of thing. But, I'm sure that there's a way to play golf that is as safe as possible. Of all of the sports, that's the one that I go, yeah. And tennis. Obviously, players don't necessarily get that close to one another that often. Tennis is something that, they should be able to do, but they're already talking about having to play with no fans. PGA's talking about not having fans in the stands as well for their first few tournaments. But, it's something, and it's one of those things where these athletes want to get back at it. And again, the one thing that I always try to bring across when I do these videos is that I stay home because I can, and I think if you can, it's the smart thing to do just in general. But if you can't, and if you need to make money and work and all of that can't be done at home, again, I totally get that. We're seeing, and I'm noticing more and more online over the last couple of weeks, even on the channel here. It's just that everybody digging in on one side or the other, and the conversations between the two sides, I think, need to be a little more fruitful than they are. I don't think one side's trying to get everybody killed, and I don't think the other side's trying to absolutely destroy the world. So there's definitely got to be some kind of a middle ground of some sort there. But I get it. I get the concerns, and at the same time, for all these professional leagues, they're looking at losing an absolute ton of money, and we know that not every league is really, really healthy. And then you're going to have, let's just say that in the fall, they go, all right, you can have crowds in Pittsburgh, you can have crowds in Denver, but you can't have crowds in Edmonton. You can't have crowds. Well, how does that work then? So certain teams would have gate revenues and some teams wouldn't. So I think there's going to have to be a comprehensive effort on the part of the National Hockey League and with sports in general to come up with the safest plan possible, and to make sure that they're taking care of players, not just physically, but the mental side of it as well. And something that sometimes gets lost in all of the shouting back and forth that's been going on is that the mental side of it is really, really important. So I'm optimistic they'll come up with something this summer where they can get something played. We will likely hear about players being allowed to play in small groups. I would say May 15th looks like it's the most likely start date, or that's what they're looking at. They're going to announce that the quarantine period will be extended by another 2 weeks to the middle of May, which means it doesn't sound like we're getting any kind of an announcement from the NHL or a timeline. And again, and I've said this since this started, there isn't pressure on the NHL to make a decision probably until the middle of May. At that point, we're looking at players have to get on the ice, they have to start skating, they have to get into shape. If you're going to have games played during the summer, it's going to have to happen where they're allowed to start skating and practicing during May. So I can't see where they can keep doing this into June. I understand why the comparisons to lockouts are there. This is not like the lockout. The difference with the lockout was the owners were going, well, we're not playing if we can't get a salary cap. And the players went, we're not playing if there's a salary cap. And they both sat on their hands and said, forget it. And they would give proposals and counter proposals, but to me, none of them were really serious. To me, all of them were kind of done for PR purposes. Right now, both the owners and the players want to find a safe way to finish the season and make sure that there is a next season as well. So the difference between lockouts and now is both sides are trying to find a way to resolve this and make hockey happen again, and sports in general is trying to find a way to make this work. And during lockouts, that wasn't the case, especially 0405. There really was no cooperation between the two sides. The last lockout we saw, which was 2012-2013, they wanted to get something done, so it didn't wipe out the entire season. And when we look at the NHL, their agreement's up next year, and this is going to impact that agreement. What we're going through right now is absolutely going to impact that agreement. And when I see people saying the optimistic things like, well, it's not going to affect salaries are going to stay flat for a couple of years, that's optimistic. Because the thing is, your escrow that comes off of players' checks is a percentage that's at the start of the year. This year, for instance, it was 14% getting taken from the checks. So if there's a shortfall, then the NHL players don't get that money back. And this year there's going to be a shortfall when it comes to revenues, no matter how the NHL plays this out. How much would escrow be next year? Next year would be what, 50%, 60%? Like, it would be some ridiculously high number. So again, both the NHL and the NHLPA will sit down and figure this out. I think that working with government bodies, whether people like them or don't like them, that's what we have. And I think something's going to end up getting worked out so that at the very least, for those of us that are at home, there's that 3 hours of normalcy you can have in a given night where you can go, hey, there's a basketball game on. I'm going to sit and watch. Hey, there's a hockey game on. Hey, I'm going to sit and watch NASCAR for a few hours. There are people who've missed that, who've absolutely missed that, and we've never gone through anything like this before where there hasn't been sports at all for a month and a half. So I think that when we figure this out, and if sports comes back en masse, and we have a resurgence of sports, as long as it's done safely, and I've never once said don't do it safely. I've never once said don't make sure you make every single effort possible to keep this as safe as possible. But again, because we don't know when this thing we're dealing with could be around for quite a while, like years. So at some point in time, we're going to see leagues give it a shot. And, I wish them the best. And I wish everyone out there watching this the best as well. I really believe we'll come through this. If I didn't have that belief, I wouldn't be able to say it. And I really believe that this is going to get better. We all went on pause 7 weeks ago, so they had time to kind of figure things out and to figure out the safest way they could do this. Ramp up testing, figure out what's going, and just come through with all of the numbers necessary, and we'll get her figured out. And again, by all means, track as many sources as you can for your news right now. Don't just follow one. Follow as many different ones as you can, and just again try not to get too caught up in all of the numbers, and just I'm looking forward to when we see sports come back on some level, and again in a safe manner. The absolute last thing the NHL is going to have happen, or the worst case scenario, is they come back and they have to shut down again. So if they come back, they will find the safest way possible to do that. I believe that. We'll see how it goes. By all means, keep your head up and stay safe, as I've been saying for the last 7 weeks to everybody out there. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. I know this is different than a regular news of the day video, just because we have this call going on and there's various players talking about it and what's going to happen. But it is still a news of the day thing, where this is still, you feel like there's some kind of an announcement coming because players have started to really get vocal about whether they really want to come back, or they're saying, I don't want to leave my family, and admitting. A lot of these players are admitting, my team's outside the playoffs, so I'm not really interested in necessarily just finishing out the season if it means I can't see my wife and kids. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it'll be done by smarter people than yours truly, which is absolutely for the best. Thank you guys so much for all your support along the way. I will talk to you again soon.